Would you believe me if I told you that these are all the USS Enterprise in disguise? Hi, I'm Joe, and today I have 3 strange new ships. This video is publishing on July 17th, which happens to be the premiere date for Season 3 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, so I thought today would be a great day to show off these 3 strange new Enterprises. These are all Rebrickable models. We'll start here with Mach 220073 by Creation Caravan. This is based on the set 30708, which is the Millennium Falcon polybag. The polybag set has 74 pieces, and this Rebrickable Mach uses 65 of them, so it is a very good reuse of those parts. Since the Millennium Falcon is a mostly round ship, it's not too big of a stretch to figure out a way to make a saucer for the Enterprise. Now, the rest of the pieces of the Millennium Falcon, though, are not necessarily conducive to making nacelles, but the Rebrickable designer has done as good a job as possible here, using these candy bar or ingot tiles to be the sides of the nacelles, using the trans light blue brick on the inside, and even the dark red wedge piece to kind of mark the front of the nacelles. We have some more of the trans light blue underneath, and even some on the underneath of the saucer section. And we have the piece here, which I believe serves as the Millennium Falcon cockpit. Here it serves as the deflector dish. And overall, this is a pretty good model for only being based on a polybag. And as of the time I built this, the instructions were free. Next, we have Mach 176339 by Ren EXP. This Rebrickable model is based on set number 31140, the Magical Unicorn, and this is a less obvious transition into an Enterprise, with the only round part being the base that the Unicorn stands on, but it still manages to capture the shape pretty well, especially if we consider this as the Enterprise D and not the original series. The saucer section is just made up of those round pieces, along with some of the other semicircle pieces or arcs just placed on top of it to give it a little bit of thickness. On the underside, we have more rainbow colors. The nacelles are separated from the main body of the ship, just using longer light blue bricks, and uses these hinge bricks to connect to the nacelle to make them stick up the way that they do. Now, I have altered this model a little bit because the original set has 145 pieces and the Rebrickable model uses only 88, so I just threw on some extra pieces, like a colored piece here to give color completely down the side of the nacelle instead of having, whoops. So it has more color down the side of the nacelle instead of just the little blue piece right here. Plus, I made some smoother connections to the side using some of these extra bricks. Now, of course, the Enterprise you would see on TV would never have all these colors, but this was a rainbow-colored Magical Unicorn set that this is being made from. So I took some liberty there, and I even used some of these extra bricks to create a stand so it could stand up more easily. But overall, there was a lot of imagination that went into creating the basics of this model. The instructions were free, and I got to experiment a little bit with just placing some of the leftover pieces. And finally, here we have the MIDI scale Enterprise, which is Rebrickable Mach 215471, another one by Creation Caravan. This Mach is based on set number 75375, which you may recognize as the MIDI scale Millennium Falcon. And Creation Caravan has actually made a lot of different Machs out of that Millennium Falcon. This Mach uses 729 of the 921 pieces of the Millennium Falcon model. And while it is definitely recognizable as the USS Enterprise, it reminds me of what the Enterprise might look like if it was being designed by the same model designers who design models for Star Wars. Because greebling is not something you usually see on a Star Trek model, but there is definitely a lot of texture on the surface of this particular starship. Now, the Millennium Falcon is fairly flat as a ship, even though it is kind of rounded. if you look at it from the top. Most of the pieces in this model are flat. There's not a whole lot of smooth curves. You might have some slanted pieces here, but not a lot of curved slopes. That's definitely a challenge when it comes to creating the curved sides of an Enterprise, like the secondary hull or the nacelles, although you get a reasonable representation of the saucer section. Now, the stand is essentially the same as what the Millennium Falcon had, which means it's actually displaying the ship at an angle, which kind of gives it that more action pose, like it's making a turn somewhere in space. But other than that, there's pretty much nothing in common between this build and the Millennium Falcon. I'll start with the saucer section, which isn't as round as you might like to see on an Enterprise. In fact, it looks more like an octagon. You do have some slight slopes here on the sides and on the front, but it definitely sticks out that these corners here are flat. The bridge, however, is well indicated by the 2x2 round tile. And then I have no idea what these are supposed to represent. This is some of the greebling I was talking about before. Underneath the saucer, there's not a whole lot going on, although at least there are a few bricks underneath to make it not be completely flat. Moving on to the secondary hull, we've got the perfect piece here to create the deflector dish, at least on the original series Enterprise. And we do have a round plate that's got the hole in the middle that helps you imagine that the secondary hull is round, even though it's quite obvious that the sides here are flat. But we also have the round piece, which is actually the Millennium Falcon cockpit, on the back to serve as the main shuttle bay. The top of the secondary hull here is mostly just bricks to kind of make the shape of it being round, even though there's no slopes anywhere, except for maybe there in the front. It's just enough so that you can imagine that it's round. The nacelles suffer from the same flat-sided piece problem, where the front of the nacelles use these pieces that were used on the sides of the Millennium Falcon, like right here. And they're enough to identify that as the front of a nacelle. But then as you get towards the back, you can see how it's all, again, you've got more like flat sides instead of a rounded shape most of the way around. And it kind of thins out towards the back. But still, this isn't a criticism of the model. It's just more of a commentary on the limitations of building within a fixed list of pieces, which is what the Millennium Falcon is. Now, this is not the sturdiest model that has ever been built. The nacelles kept falling off mid-construction. The instructions have you build the secondary hull first, and then the supports, and then you attach the nacelles to the end. And there are pieces here on the bottoms of the nacelles that are designed to make sure it leans at just the correct angle, but it doesn't take a whole lot of extra pressure to make the nacelle fall off. And similarly, the nacelles are held onto the top only by these two stud connections here. And this can actually rotate a little bit. Well, see, there's an example. But these would rotate here. And the idea being is once you have it up at the top and you lean it back as far as it'll go, the way the other pieces underneath will allow you to, that's when you have it in the right position. And one last thing, since I've already destroyed the ship, the saucer section is actually connected by an angled Technic piece, which is the same piece that puts the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon at the angle that it does. And it just pops off and is held on by one Technic axle. But unlike the nacelles, it holds its place pretty well. And when we put the two models side by side, even though the Millennium Falcon has almost 200 more pieces and is definitely much more dense, we can see that the Enterprise actually is a pretty good size for this amount of pieces. This Rebrickable Mach cost $7, and I think it was completely worthwhile to try and build this. Thank you for watching my video about these Rebrickable models of the Starship Enterprise. If you are planning to watch the start of Season 3 of Strange New Worlds tonight, I hope you enjoy it. But always remember that today is a good day to build.